Hi, everyone. This is Miranda with the Valuable Voices podcast. I'm excited for you guys to meet Stephen Rogers today. We met in a podcast group. And again, I just love who God's bringing into my life. And we were talking a little bit, everybody's story is inspiring. So, Stephen, thank you for being on today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. I know you're an author and we'll get to all that, but kind of give us a little of your background and your story growing up.
Sure. Well, I grew up. I grew up in a very stable, suburban, loving household. Grew up going to church. I have had a lifelong faith. My career was in accounting and business. I did an awful lot of administrative things with the companies I worked for. And as I went through that career, people were put in front of me that really helped me to develop and work on my faith and grow my faith. And while I was working, my focus was on uh, using my faith in the workplace. I mean, you can't go into a workplace and say, "Hey, I'm a Christian, sign
Right.
up."
Yeah.
But you can try to conduct yourself in a certain way.
Yeah.
And then if someone asks a question, you can go ahead and jump right in and have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I did until I was about 55 years old. And awful lot of incredibly great things happened from God perspective throughout those years. However, I retired when I was 55 for the sole purpose of trying to become a writer. It's been a lifelong dream. And that has brought a whole new host of spiritual development and growth for me. Because I started out as a Stephen King typewriter.
Okay.
And being an accountant, I did this math like Stephen King's getting older, someone's going to have to fill the void.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was writing these incredibly violent stories about serial killers and time travel and things like that. And then I just had an experience on a flight going to Israel where my genre completely switched and I became a Christian author.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was, we were on the flight. I'll tell you about that. We were
Yeah,
on the
I'd love to
flight.
hear it.
But my wife's dream was to go to Israel. And we ended up booking a trip. And what happens when you start writing is you ask yourself 100 times a day, I wonder what would happen if. And then of those 100 times, you might get one short story. All right. So we were on that flight and maybe a half hour in, and I said, geez, I wonder what would happen if I was an alcoholic, recently sprung from rehab, and I had to take this trip.
Ah,
And I ended up creating this character on the flight. I basically wrote the first 2 pages of the book in the flight, 10,000 edits ago, but the first 2 pages. And then I journaled in his voice throughout the trip.
wow.
And in that 10 days or however long we were over there, I think it was 10 days, my genre completely switched and my focus as a writer completely switched.
Huh.
And it's been just a great ride ever since. It's been wonderful.
Very cool. That's so interesting. So going from still fiction, but I love that because maybe a little bit more relatable, right? Serial
I think
killer
so.
versus an addict or an alcoholic, definitely an interesting perspective because you probably did. Do you have that background?
Well, and that's a lot of people, when they read the book, they say it's autobiographical. And the answer is sort of.
Okay.
I personally and my wife have no issue with drugs or alcohol. You could take it all away and we'd be fine. But we've been surrounded in our immediate and in our extended family with alcohol and drug addiction.
Okay.
And the result has been through that exposure, I guess, an assimilation of the personalities that were involved. And that led to me putting this character together. The fascinating thing I've learned, I talked about my spiritual journey as a writer.
Yeah.
Here's the most fascinating thing that happened as a result of this book. And Kurt Vonnegut famously said, you're not a writer until you're willing to write something that you put in a folder and no one else ever sees, but you write it just to write it.
Mm-hmm.
That could have happened with this book, and it still would have had a tremendous impact on me.
Sure.
Because what I have discovered in talking about the book to different groups is that I did not release the guilt and anger and resentment and frustration that was in my heart until I finished the first draft of the book.
Wow.
Which really means the book's a big fat journal entry.
Yeah, very therapeutic, huh?
Oh, yeah, very therapeutic. So it has completely changed my spiritual journey where that was holding me back.
Wow.
And now I've been able to, I mean, who knows how close we get to God, right? But I know I'm closer. I'm still 8,000 galaxies away or whatever it is, but I'm closer.
Neat.
So it's been a great experience for me.
That's very cool. I think there's a lot of people out there that might be wanting to write a book or a story. And again, I think there's just something inside of us that needs to get out.
Mhm.
Again, even if nobody ever reads it, I think just the, again, therapeutic or whatever you want, the growth that could come from that, the awareness, the
Yep.
taking the time to sit there and journal, about something like that. So that's great.
Yeah, it had a massive impact on me,
Cool.
and it's helped me with forgiveness quite a bit. And I'm not good at forgiveness, so it's helped me with forgiveness. It's a
Very
weakness
cool.
of mine.
Yeah. How many books do you have?
This is the first book well, let me rephrase that. There's a book sitting on the shelf here that'll never be published.
Okay.
That was a practice novel where I just learned how to put a story together
Okay.
and what I need to get better at. But this is the first book I've had published.
Oh, very
And
cool.
the publisher who published it I think is interested in the next one, and I'm writing a sequel. And we talked a little bit before. I have to buckle down for the next 3 months and get the darn thing on paper.
Yeah.
But I've got one out right now, and that's this one. And
Okay.
I'm 61 years old, and I'm hoping that I stay healthy enough long enough. I've got 3 other books in mind, including the one I'm working on now.
Wow.
And I'm not a fast writer. And so it takes a couple of years for each book. So I'm hoping I stay healthy enough long enough to get those 3 down.
Well, you look very healthy. And it's interesting to me that you said you retired in order to write the book. Did you ever think about trying to write the book as you were working?
Well, I did some of that while I was working. It was primarily short stories.
Okay.
Although, like I said, I was an accountant, so I wrote this 90 pages of this funky little novel called The Deal, an accounting thriller. And that's sitting over here too. And it's awful. Okay, it's awful. But I tried, but the jobs I had were pretty intense,
Sure.
and I was just out of gas. I would sit
Yeah.
down, I could do a half hour a night. And so and I was at the point in my career where I was kind of done, and
Yeah.
my wife and I could afford it.
Yeah.
And she had decided months before I decided that I was going to retire. She was just, this is her term, waiting for me to go through my process. Close.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. So there's a sequel. So the sequel is what you're working on. So same kind of story, similar to.
Well, in the first book, my character Ben Cahill in Israel he makes that first step
Okay.
towards God and sobriety.
Yeah.
And the second book is the hard work of recovery and true connection with God. And my idea is and his family. He's got to get things straightened out with his family.
Yeah.
And my idea is in the third book, he'll then take that to someone else.
Wow.
And I call it the accidental Pilgrim Trilogy, because I'm going to have him travel somewhere in each book. So in the second book, he travels to the island of Iona in Scotland,
Okay.
which is a really cool pilgrimage place. We went there in May.
Neat.
And I don't know about the third book yet. That's too far out to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing at a time, right?
Exactly.
I love
Right.
that. I mean, and I love that because it just speaks a lot to, faith, number one. Just because you make
Mhm.
the decision doesn't mean your life is simple or you
Right.
got all your everything together. It's really a process. It's really a relationship. It's building that and sharing that with other people, and forgiveness you talk about. So I love that. Very cool.
And I called the first book, Into the Room, because my theory evangelically is that what I can do evangelically for someone is get them, quote, into the room with God.
Yeah.
And then God works it out with them. I
Yeah.
can't tell someone what's right or wrong for them in their spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And I certainly can't, I got enough problems. I'm not going to judge the way anyone's living their life because
Right.
I've got enough flaws myself.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to get people into the room with God and then let them and God work it out. And there's a lot of fits and starts there.
Yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. For me, there was a lot of starts and stops in
Yeah.
that process. I don't want to speak for your journey.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, being humble, and no one has it all figured out, right?
No, I know.
All
My
on our own
goodness, no.
journey. So where can everybody find you? Tell us your website and how to find your books.
Oh, well, the book's on Amazon.
Okay.
Into the Room, Stephen Rogers. In my website, you can also get the book off my website, which is stephen-rogers.com.
Okay.
And when your name is Stephen Rogers, because of Captain America, it's very difficult to get any sort of web presence. So you have to put the stephen-rogers.com.
Got it.
And also on that website, I do a monthly blog column where I just do silly observations about life.
Oh,
So there's a
cool.
blog column there too. I write, like one time I wrote about my oldest daughter's dating life, and I called it Pigs at the Door. Because dads don't like it when their daughters are dating. And so that kind of thing. They're just fun.
I love it.
But that's the website, you can get there, and there's you can click on the Amazon button. If people want, for like, I think it's $16 when you include the shipping, I can mail them an autographed copy of the book.
Oh, cool.
And there's the paperback, there's the Kindle version, and there's also an audiobook available on Amazon. So that's how they can get there.
Perfect.
And this is what the cover looks like for anybody, because
neat.
it is sometimes difficult on Amazon to find a certain book. So
Yeah.
that's what it looks like.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, again, you look healthy. You look like I love, just sharing your story, and again, just kind of living the dream, right? I mean, I'm working full time, what seems like forever. I look forward to retirement and doing something I enjoy, and kind of sharing your story, or sharing what's in your mind, what's in your heart. So one last question as we wrap up, I'm curious what advice you might have for somebody that wants to write a book and they're busy working, kind of how did you transition from that, or what advice would you have for somebody that feels?
Well, I think, boy, all right, I'm going to say 4 things. Actually, I might say 5 things, but I'll do it quick. It's all practice. Practice.
Yeah.
And it's practice as you walk around, like you look at something and try to practice describing it.
Okay.
And as I say this, I am by no means a master writer. I want to be very clear. Okay.
Sure.
So there are workshops and conferences are very good. You don't have to go to 10 of them because they all give you the same kind of advice, but they're very good. Write what you want to write, and don't worry about the commercial thing.
Yeah.
And clearly write what you want to write, because the thing I've learned is not everyone likes what you write.
Right.
So you darn well better make sure you like what you write.
Yes.
And if you can afford it, get a writing coach.
Okay.
I hired a writing coach, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and he really, really helped.
Okay.
And then the last thing is, if you're going to submit a novel, or a book, I should say, not a novel, get it professionally edited first. That's worth every penny. And it was actually my editor that found my publisher. So it was a win. It was a total win-win.
Yeah.
She recommended me to the publisher. So, but it's really practice. It's practice. And
I love
that's
that.
all you can do. Yeah. And there's a book by, oops, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
There's a great book by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird, which is the best book on writing I've ever read. And it's also laugh out loud funny.
Oh, cool.
She's a very funny woman. So I would recommend that too.
Awesome. Well, I love that. And again, just as you go through the journey, you're growing, you're learning about yourself, about what you want to write about, again, it just sounds therapeutic, just people journaling every day and just kind of getting that out, getting your thoughts out. And I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. Again, I just love meeting different people, hearing their stories. I love what you're doing. Again, kind of the second part of your life, right?
Yeah. Chapter 2 or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that just sounds great. And I love just the writing about your daughter. I mean, I love your humor, and, I could sit here and talk to you for a while, but just keep doing what you're doing. And I just want to encourage you it's just inspiring to hear your story. So thanks for jumping on.
Well, and I would say the same to you, because you're a great interviewer. So thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks. I have fun doing it. And again, I just love connecting and hearing what God's doing. And seeing people kind of fulfill their purpose or their, desires. And again, they're just growing along the way. So, well, thanks everyone for listening. Stephen Rogers, check him out. We'll put the links below, and I look forward to reading your book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.